Hey,
Hey
Shai.
there.
Uh, so awesome to see you again. We were just
Again,
talking yesterday about
yeah.
this.
I think it was like less than 12 hours.
Yeah, less than 12 hours ago. Web3, you are an absolute expert on it.
Thank
But
you.
please, for those who don't know you, yeah, tell us about yourself.
Well, I'm humbled by the moniker of expert, right, in a very new field that's moving very fast. So maybe an expert today, maybe not tomorrow. My name is Shai Brodnik. Nice to meet everybody. I'm the global tech and segment lead for Web3 and blockchain within the AWS Partner organization. And so that means my role is specifically aligned with looking at how do we accelerate the public permissionless as well as private and permission ecosystems, really through our partners. And that's both through technical resources and partnerships, as well as business and other strategies together. So I'm super excited to be here. We're going to be digging into a lot of fun stuff. So let's kick it off.
Yeah, we got a lot of Web3 newbies. I know I definitely am. Anyone else
Okay.
is totally. It's a safe space to be able to have these kind of conversations for all of us to learn together.
Yep.
So for anyone who's new to developing, maybe what are some of the key tools that they should be thinking about as part of their journey to start building a Web3 app?
Yeah, I think that's a great place to start, right? So let's start by kind of thinking about what a blockchain really is, right? When we talk about Web 1, Web 2, Web 3, let's just talk about what those are, right? So there's the evolution of Web 1 into Web 3, right? And Web 3 is all about data and ownership and kind of bringing back to that ownership society where we can own our data. So when we think about the tools, right, some of those tools are going to specifically lend to that model of really the blockchain model. And a blockchain, really, for simplicity, let's just remember, it's really just a distributed network of nodes on that network, right? And those nodes can be anything, right? They can be a laptop, a server, they can be a phone, a watch, whatever, right? So once we get into the tools, some of the things that we first need is we need to interact with that blockchain network. And the way that we're going to do that is through node connectivity tools. And there's many ones out there. You can do so on AWS with the Amazon Managed Blockchain Service. So within the service itself, you can go deploy a public Ethereum node, and you can go and run and access a public Ethereum node and then use it to pull that data. You can also do so with Hyperledger if you're building a private network as well. But we have great partners in this space too, right? Moralis has their speedy nodes as well. Infura, Alchemy, and Quick Nodes, and many other providers will allow you to go on and go deploy a node. So you have your node, right? You can connect to that blockchain network. The next step is you need to start thinking about your development tooling, your testing tooling. It's a little bit different than what we're used to in the Web 2 world with our traditional languages. And so there's Ethereum specific development languages for Solidity. There's specific development languages for Rust and Haskell for other languages and other networks. But you're usually going to start with a common tool called Hardhat. It's one of the common partner tools that we hear from a lot of our customers out there when we ask them, what's the tools you're using? It's usually Hardhat, which is really for digging into the code itself, right? It's an IDE, but it's going to allow you to do stack traces. It's going to allow you to dig into the console logs and really find out what's going on under the hood. Similarly, there's other tools we hear, Truffle and Remix IDE, both great tools as well that we hear from our customers over and over again for debugging and troubleshooting their smart contract development. Let's talk about a couple more because I'm excited here. So I'm just going to bring up a couple more that I had in my back pocket here. So front end, right? There's still a front end to Web3, right? We talk a lot about Web3 being immutable and being blockchain contracts. Yes, that is very much part of it, but there's still the front end that we have to worry about. We have to build that front end. Part of that front end in some cases also the contract itself, because in some cases you will be directly with a contract. So some of those tools, again, Moralis, a great partner and developer in that space, really helping developers simplify the overall workflow so that they can kind of understand, okay, now I'm getting started with a node, then I'm moving to the IDE, now I'm moving into testnet for test deployments, and then I'm moving into the mainnet. Similarly, Web3.js library is a great set of collection of tools, allowing you to do RPC connections or WebSocket connections and manage a wallet and sort of all those basic primitives that probably just about 2 to 3 years ago were a huge pain, and developers were building manually with core libraries. So really excited to see a lot of these abstraction libraries come to the industry to help make it easier for developers to get started. Web3 Auth is another really great one, again, that we hear from customers all the time. When they're looking at working with non-custodial wallets, right? So that's self-custody wallets, people like myself that hold our wallet or our private keys. Another great tool for doing authentication. And a lot of these tools, the great part is when you're using these partner tools is you're inheriting that security that they've already been through, right? They've already gone through security audits. They've gone through validation. These tools have been hardened. These libraries have been hardened. They're used in other contracts as well. And so you're able to get that bit of security confidence that you know what you're building upon has been used somewhere else in the ecosystem and not hacked so far, at least. So let's get back to storage. I have very much an infrastructure background, and I have to talk about storage because I love it so much. And it very much is in the blockchain world because we have to store our data somewhere, right? We can't just throw it in the clouds and it goes nowhere, right? It's actually being stored on physical disk still somewhere. So in that decentralized storage world, right, we have S3. You can still build architectures with AWS S3 where the front end of the application is decentralized. The back end on the application itself is running a smart contract that's also decentralized. And then you have your assets in S3 and you build them up there. But you can also, again, leverage many decentralized partners that we have as well. So things like IPFS. IPFS is very common. It's one of the first ones. Most projects, protocols are built on IPFS or using IPFS. If you're buying an avatar or PFP NFT, it's very likely that that asset actually lives on IPFS. Now, there are a couple of other ones again. So there's Arweave, which is another distributed network, Filebase, Filecoin, Sia, Storage, the list goes on and on, right? There's so many partners out there, and these are the ones we hear a lot from our partners. But there's also a challenge to developers that's still happening in the storage space a little bit, and that's actually how do you work with this storage, right? Because a lot of them, while they're using S3 APIs, it's still a new concept of how do you work with decentralized storage and manage sharding, and there's all the new principles. So again, I'm excited that we see these new tools coming out. Things like Spheron as well as NFT storage and Pinata are great partners that are going to give you that front end or simplified APIs to manage a decentralized storage backend. So you as a developer don't have to think about that, right? It's just traditional storage like you're used to. It's similar to S3 that you're used to. It doesn't really change. And the platform kind of takes care of all that backend for you. And the cool thing is that all the data is still written to the blockchain networks, whatever it's using on the backend. So it's not like you're introducing a centralized intermediary. And what's actually pretty cool is a lot of these front ends are decentralized themselves as well. So I think that's a really exciting space. Now, let's finish off with a couple of things around security. Then we'll move on here just for the sake of time as well. Mithril and Mythics, great tools for scanning your contracts. There's a whole bunch of other partners out there. Security is really important. Please, do the due diligence and make sure your audits and start those audits early. Great partners out there for doing security audits. And then your wallets, right? You have to understand things like MetaMask and Rabby and Phantom, Coinbase wallet, Trust wallet, Token Pocket. So many different wallet providers out there that you as a developer need to kind of understand which one you're using. Most, kind of use those first couple, 3 ones on there. And then from there, you can kind of go build and build your application. You have Open Zeppelin contracts, and then a lot of other things that we're not going to dig into, which are still kind of in the Web 2 world, right? So monitoring and CI/CD are still very important in the Web 3 world. They don't go away by any means, but they don't really change that much from our traditional Web 2 space. So it's still something we have to keep in mind. And maybe we adjust our deployment models a little bit for the Web 3 world.
I think one thing that kind of stood out from all the different options that you were just like saying is like if you're starting now, you have you don't have to build everything out completely from scratch. There's options within AWS, and you've got options within the Web3 ecosystem of other partners that you're referring to that have built out different solutions, so you can be able to get something up and running pretty quickly. It sounds like.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, to me, that's what's really exciting about this space, right? It's that ability to build on top of other tools and for us to leverage what other people build, and very much a culture of open source and community building. So I love that about this space, and very much true.
Yeah, and I know there's so many different concepts, and it seems a bit conceptual at this point. So I think the best way to really kind of hone in a lot of these concepts is to visually see it. So
yeah,
you have a demo you can show us?
I do. Let's dig into it, right? There's always, that thought about, what do you demo when you think about a blockchain network, right? What do you want to see? And really, because when we're developers and we're building things, one of the key places we're going to start is really with our Ethereum node itself, right? We have to actually have a node. We have to have something that we're connecting to the blockchain network with. And so there's a great post by my peer Raj, Dan Charles, that walks through deploying an Ethereum node on Amazon EC2 using AWS CDK. And so this is a really great template for not only rolling out your own blockchain network, If you're building your own, right, use this as a template. But if you're a consumer of a blockchain network and you go and you pull the libraries and the agents for that blockchain network, you can run that on AWS, right? So this is an Ethereum example only because I'm using the Geth and Lighthouse clients for ETH1 and 2. But that's the cool thing, right? It can be any blockchain network that you want can be deployed on an EC2 instance, and then you're off and running. You templatize it, you distribute it around the world in many geographical regions. So really cool stuff. So let's dig into it. This is the architecture that we're going to be digging into today. It's fairly simple. Again, it's really just an EC2 instance. Specifically in this case, we're going to use Graviton because it's a lower cost instance, and we don't need necessarily the performance of necessarily a full or a higher node. But in depending on your use cases, that's again the cool thing is you can adjust that need based on you can adjust the EC2 size based on your need. So I think that's really cool there. Again, for client wise, if you're familiar with Ethereum, we are going to use the Geth client for ETH1. And yes, there was a fun ETH merge back on the 14th and 15th, and we're past that. And so now we have to think about ETH2 and our Lighthouse client and how we're going to connect to the ETH2 network as well. Just for memory, to remind everybody again, the ETH2 network is the beacon chain, and then we have ETH1 is kind of the Ethereum. It's the old network. We're not going to really be talking about the old network just for the sake of this discussion. And for monitoring,
just getting curious. So with this type of architecture here, like what are some examples of kinds of applications that someone could build?
Yeah, so the main thing that we're building here is a validator node, right? So what we're building is a node that's going to validate transactions on the network. And so it's providing that security guarantee to the network for validating transactions, right? We call this a miner, right? That's mining transactions or mining cryptocurrency or digital assets, right? So we have a lot of customers that are looking to build a validator node. However, right, depending on the network that you're working with, right? So Ethereum, for example, you have full nodes, you have archive nodes. Other networks have different kinds of node types, right? So that's the cool thing here is it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to deploy a validator node specifically or a miner node. It could be a read-only node. And so if it's a read-only node, it's a very lightweight node. It can run on a container, an EKS, right? It can run it before. And then the cool thing is that you use that for analytics. You can now query the blockchain data. You can pull that locally into something like Athena or any other kind of database. And then from that database, then do all your queries and do analytics. So some really cool use cases when you're able to query that data from a blockchain network through the node. Again, any network. I think that's the exciting thing. So
wow, yeah, I mean, it's cool that like the way that you're explaining it. I think for those who are maybe kind of used to building in AWS, like there's a lot of still similar patterns that actually exist. That the gap is a little bit smaller than I think it sounds like to someone who's completely new and thinks that it's a very new way of being able to build.
And that's the reason I like this example, because a lot of developers I work with, when they go through this, they realize, oh, wait, it's not that much different, right? Yes, I need to understand a few things, but it's not hugely different. So let's dig into it, right? I want to jump into the demo here and share some of this cool stuff. Hopefully things work well. Let's see, right? So first thing that we're going to do when we go ahead and want to deploy something, right? We need to install CDK. So let's go ahead and deploy CDK along with TypeScript. I am doing this in real time, so pulling the stuff in real time. Then we're going to deploy. Then we're going to do Rocket Pool, right? So Rocket Pool is a service that allows you to sort of group together your nodes, right? So if you're a single validator node and you want to increase your chances of mining a block, right, or validating a transaction, you can pool your hash rate, right? Your luck together with others, and you work together in what's called a pool. So Rocket Pool is just one of those partners that does that, and that's a great way if you cannot necessarily don't have the resources, for operational management or financial to deploy, multiple nodes, right? Maybe 10 or 20 or hundreds of nodes to increase your validation ability. So again, we're going to use Rocket Pool because it's a great tool here. So we're going to go ahead and clone the GitHub repo from the blog post I shared earlier that my peers created. Then we're going to go ahead and change over to that directory. We're going to run our npm install. And then we're going to go ahead and start deploying all the assets in there. We're going to start setting up our folders, everything for CDK to make sure that CDK can set up correctly. It's going to initialize the directory. It's going to pull down all the libraries and instances that are needed for Rocket Pool. There's a lot of container images that are required. So all that stuff is happening in the back end. You can see that 33 packages, and audit over 70 packages in just 15 seconds there. So let's go ahead and bootstrap and deploy CDK. And again, this is going to take...
Yeah, who are new to CDK, it's a cloud development kit, basically infrastructure as code that you can but do it programmatically if you're not using infrastructure code. I guess this is my SA hat being a service announcement. Start using it.
Yes.
That would be a good time.
And if you come from an infrastructure background like me, don't be intimidated. Once you get over that little bit of a hurdle, it is a fun environment to start building in, and you learn pretty quickly. So again, this is gonna load. So what's happening in the back end is CDK is actually setting up the primitives for us, right? It's setting up the actual CDK folder structure specific to the application. It's starting to build out the CloudFormation templates, starting to build the CloudFormation templates based on the data that we have in the CDK template. And it's starting to roll out those critical things there. There's a couple other things that happen when you run the bootstrap function within Cloud Development Kit. So what will also happen is there's some core functionality that needs to be deployed. So that's things like the IAM role, that's the S3 bucket and the files associated with that, as well as the CloudFormation templates that need to be deployed for that CDK deployment. So all that kind of foundation is taken care of for you. And then that template, that code, and everything that you just built is pushed out for you. So, you sit back, and when you're building these things, you just grab your cup of coffee or cup of tea and enjoy the sort of process happening for you. Again, that's why I say if you come from a background like myself, don't be intimidated. It's actually pretty cool when you see this stuff being rolled out for you, and you don't have to click around doing it. All right, so we finished the bootstrapping, right? We got all the foundations in there. Now we're actually going to do the CDK deploy. So that means we're going to tell CloudFormation to go ahead and push that template out and push out the resources that we need. Now I'm just using require approval, set to never, only in demo use case. Don't use this in production, just to speed things up a little bit here so that we don't have to go through all the prompts and interactive prompts, and we can just let the CDK deploy. So again, what is happening here? Let's go back to our template. This does take a few minutes, and I like doing things live. And so while this is going deploying, let's go back to the graphic here and remember what's happening. So we have an EC2 instance, right? But we also have VPCs. We have security group rules. We have an SSM template, a system manager template that allows us to access the EC2 instance securely without having to open up port 22, and we can leverage Session Manager to do so. That's getting set up for us as well. All the IAM roles and all the policies are getting set up for us as well. So all this stuff is happening in the back end so that we don't actually have to do it and think about it. And again, the great thing is that when we're using this as part of a node deployment, and our partners are using this, that allows them to focus on really building the application and focus on the application part, right? They know that security has been hardened. They know that this process has been through. Let's just flip back real quick. Again, I'm going to go back and forth a few times here so we can keep that progress. You can see that this really is happening in real time. Those CloudFormation assets are actually getting created themselves. So if we go into CloudFormation, if we were looking to the console itself, we would see all those things being created. So let's take a quick peek. And just a tip, if you're looking at the console, don't type the word cloud, just type in formation, and then you get CloudFormation.
Ooh, so, that's a pro tip. I did not know that.
Yep. There's a lot of cloud in AWS, right? So use the word formation, and I'll take you right to it. So here are my CloudFormation stacks, right? Remember, CDK is pushing up that CloudFormation. And so these are my CloudFormation templates in that, create in progress state. I can refresh it here. I can go back to my console. I can see what's happening here. I can go grab more cups of coffee and tea. This is going to take another minute or two. So I want to do a quick transition. Let's talk about, one of the challenges when you're building this node is the synchronization of data, right? This is a challenge we hear all the time from our customers, right? It takes time to synchronize that node with whatever blockchain I'm using. And it's really cool. There's a lot of really cool partners that we have out there that are using the checkpoint function within something like Ethereum to allow you to be able to pull only the latest hash value. And so it's almost like a summary of the chain before it without having to pull the whole entire chain and all the 300 or 400 gigabytes of data that are there today, right? In some cases, we're going to get to terabytes and terabytes of data. So really cool, this idea that you can only pull part of it. And so what I wanted to show is that within the Rocket Pool and with leveraging a partner like Infura, you're actually able to go into Infura, create an application. And I just have a simple application, and you can do this with a free account called RP Checkpoint Sync. Doesn't have to do anything. I'm going to delete it after this, so don't even try to copy the key here. But you'll have the endpoints, and we're specifically going to use the endpoints for the Pareto network, because the Pareto network is the test network for Ethereum too. So by grabbing the endpoints for that network and putting them into Rocket Pool, which I'll show you towards the end of the presentation here, we are able to speed up that deployment of that node and only pull that last amount of data and get synchronized much, much faster.
Yeah.
So
Shai, that's Infura.io, like just to share with everyone else in the chat. All right.
Correct. Infura.io, and again, Morales does a great job of providing an RPC endpoint. The main thing that you're trying to do is you're trying to get closer to the blockchain network as your node is synchronizing, right? So you can pull that checkpoint. So that's the key there. And I love how simple they make it.
Yeah. And I just want to remind anyone, I mean, I know there's like so much here that's going on. So if you've got questions, please don't be shy. I mean, this is for you. We want to be able to answer any questions that you've got going on.
Yep. Please send them over. Right. Happy to chat about this stuff. And again, it's a friendly space. And if this stuff is intimidating, it's okay. Right. I mean, that's the point, is we're all learning together.
Exactly.
All right, so took just under 200 seconds. It was a little faster than it was before. So that's good. So let's go ahead, and now we're going to do a key thing, right? We're not going to SSH into our EC2 instance, because that would be an awful idea. We don't want to expose port 22, right? But what we're going to do is we're going to leverage SSM. So the template gives us the SSM command for us. And again, Systems Manager is going to open a session between our in this case, my Cloud9 instance, where I'm doing my coding work and I'm doing my demo, and that EC2 instance that's running on the back end. So you can see my IP before was a 172 address. That was the Cloud9 instance where I was working in. Now I'm in the 10.0.0 address, which is actually the EC2 instance. So I've kind of like SSH'd into it, but through the remote shell through Session Manager. So much more secure to do so. So let's get to some of the next steps that we have here, right? We went through deploying CDK, and we're actually on the instance itself, right? One of the key things that we want to do is we want to enable Rocket Pool to be able to collect some system data, things like uptime, CPU metrics, other data. Again, we can pull this data from AWS metrics as well, but built into Rocket Pool and the Grafana and all the collector engines is the ability to pull locally. So let's just do that, because it is much more easy this way. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to tell Rocket Pool to go ahead and start using those new libraries and go ahead and install what they call the update tracker. Again, update tracker just means it's tracking the OS and tracking metrics and different things on the OS itself. Really just two commands there, right? Installing the upload commands, which is installing more utils. And then we get this lovely error, right? Nothing like a demo without an error, but I knew this one was coming and I planned for it. And what this is really complaining about is simply Rocket Pool does not like the fact that we're on SE Linux. Sorry, not Rocket Pool specifically, right? But the underlying libraries that Rocket Pool is leveraging don't necessarily run like we're on SE Linux and it can't do things manually, just again, because of that hardened security. So this is actually a good thing. I'm kind of happy that it's not able to do this for me, because I need to, to take this action intentionally, make sure that I know what I'm doing here. I do know what I'm doing, so I'm going to go ahead and restart the services appropriately. And I'm not going to break anything. And after those services start, we're going to go ahead and start our Rocket Pool. And once Rocket Pool goes up, you'll get this warning, right? It says you want to make sure you want it. And then you'll get this lovely slashing warning. Slashing is the idea that you're getting penalized for something that you're doing on the network, right? So in this case, bringing up a validator node and taking it down, up and down, up and down. Now, I didn't bring it up before, so that's okay. I can just go ahead and use it this way and go ahead and start it. I'm not going to get slashed because it wasn't up before. And so what Rocket Pool is actually doing now, and this is the really cool thing, is on that EC2 instance, there's a whole bunch of containers running, about 8 or 9 or so containers, all running very specific things on there, right? That's the beauty of containers, is that we're running very specific things. And so we have things like the exporter, Grafana, all the underlying services that you would normally have to configure and manage on your own are all being done for you by the Rocket Pool libraries. And again, it's just going to take just a minute or two here to finish creating. All those containers need to be deployed. And then once it's finished deploying all the containers, it'll go ahead and move on to the next step, which will show in the Grafana console, which is the metrics and UI and monitoring layer. So let's give that a moment to finish here. I will pause and kiss.
Call out, while we're waiting for that we do have a survey, and I actually read it. I do care about what it is that you want to hear from the show. What are some topics that you want to cover? What's working? What isn't working? So we just dropped it in the chat. Please take a moment to fill it out. All
right. So while that's getting deployed, again, those containers are getting launched. remember that we have the dashboard. So let me go ahead and jump back to the dashboard and show what that looks like. So again, when the dashboard is deployed, one of the cool things is you can now see what your console is actually happening, right? So I am now in my dashboard view, and I'm peering into my node that's running, that node that I just deployed right now. I'm pulling all that data, right? And so my client's been up for about five hours now. Sorry, this was the previous node I deployed. And so that's showing all the data that's there, right? It does take time to synchronize. So that's one of the reasons why I used a previous instance here. It does take time to synchronize. So just be aware of that. When you do pull up the node as it's coming up, you will usually get 0 data because that node is still deploying. So the lovely of the demo here is that it is apparently taking a little more time to deploy that container. So we'll give that a few more minutes here. But this is the key thing there, right? I mean, once you get to this moment, it's kind of an aha moment. That validator node that I went deployed is now on the test network. It's it can be validating blocks if you go through the next couple of steps on there, which is you actually have to commit some fake Ethereum to there. And then once you do that, now you're validating transactions on a network. And again, the test network, you can then choose to move to the mainnet network, and you can go on from there and build the rest of your application. Let me check back on this one.
Yeah. I think any demo that kind of ends with graphs and pretty charts is always a success. So I think this is really cool. I'm sure a lot of people would kind of want to play around with this in their own account and watch this video. So again, for those who are new to this stream, this is going to go on AWS's YouTube channel. I know we've covered so much information today, so definitely look out for it on YouTube so you can rewatch it. I know I will be rewatching it. So yeah, Shai, I guess any other resources, what's the best place for people to learn and start building in AWS?
Yeah, so I think when you're starting to build and you're getting to that stage, I think one of the key things is really focusing on hands-on, right? Get your hands dirty, start building, start going through it. There's great partner tools out there. I mentioned Morales and Alchemy, right? They have not only great tools, but also great academies and great educational resources. Crypto Zombies is another one, as well as Binance and Chainlink Academy. Both offer great educational experiences. There's a whole bunch of other decentralized ones. A couple of things I want to mention as well, right? Remember that when we work with AWS, one of the things that we focus on is really building the lower level primitives, right? We want to offer that flexibility to our customers. So when you're going down this stage, Web3 is not really any different than you've done in Web2, right? When you've been in the Web2 world as a developer, we've looked at serverless, and we've looked at containers, and we've looked at ways to make our lives easier. It doesn't change in Web3, right? You can just as easily deploy, use GitHub, use Amplify, use many other service, EKS, to deploy your nodes, different kind of read-only nodes or indexer nodes. So many different things you can do there, right? You can still use step functions to pull data off chain and do something with that data and move your transactions around. You can even use AMB as well, right, to pull a public Ethereum node, so you don't have to run it yourself. Then, here in this case, I am managing my own Grafana instance, but there's also managed Grafana, right? So you can have your managed Grafana, managed Prometheus, and you can have those services managed for you. And now you're just focusing on that node, and that's it, nothing else there. So I think that's really where I focus to get started.
This was just like I feel like when you go into like a new country and like you don't know the language and you just kind of learn by listening to people, like that's kind of how I feel like I just an immersion. That's the best way to learn. Best way to learn, start coding and doing it yourself. Shai, this was amazing. I'm excited to start playing around with this, start using some of the tools and resources that you suggested. So thanks so much for showing this to us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I encourage everybody, right? Everything that we learned today, if you learn a little bit today, you already know more than somebody else did yesterday. And so always try to be that teacher and educator and try to educate other people as you're learning in this space. And it's super fun, exciting. Thank you for having me on. It was a blast. Go deploy your own node.
I know. Gaza Slade just said, "Awesome talk, by the way. I'd stay here and listen for hours." I feel like I could too. I mean, this is these. I know you talk to your kids about Web3, and you're saying they're like sick of it by now.
Yeah,
so cool.
They may be listening. So
yeah,
we'll see.
One quick question. I think we'll show, and then we can like kind of wrap up.
Sure.
Are there any ways to host a website entirely via a chain? From Freedom Numbers 1. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, we're actually seeing a lot of those use cases come out, right, where that front end is actually decentralized, right? So you take that front end, You think about very simple, single page websites. Those are very common where you have a single page website, you have very simplistic sites. Those can very much be served off of IPFS or any other decentralized network and deploy your website off that. So we are actually seeing a lot of those. There's ones out there like mirror.xyz is a great example. Library is another one. There's a whole bunch of other decentralized front ends that are completely decentralized and run on those networks.
Awesome. I love it. Thanks for the question. Freedom numbers 1. And yeah, Shai, this has been an absolute blast. Thank you for everyone else who has been here today on AWS On Air. Please fill out the survey. I read them. I deeply care about what it is that you want to hear, what's working, what isn't, so we can really make this as an effective use of your time. Thank you so much for being here with us today, and we will see you next week, same time on Friday.